The night was still. The kind of stillness that makes even the trees seem afraid to move. A pale moon hung above the forest, casting soft silver light across the quiet village of whispering pines. The wind, usually playful among the pine needles, held its breath. Everything was silent, too silent. It was the kind of silence that comes before something terrible happens. A silence that wraps around the world like a warning. Inside a small wooden cottage near the edge of the forest, a mother stirred in her sleep. Mara always kept one ear open, especially after her husband died. She was used to waking at every creak or breath. But tonight was different. She hadn't heard anything. Not until that sound, faint at first, then clearer, a click like a window gently opening. A shiver ran down her spine even before her eyes opened. Her heart began to race. She sat up quickly, pulling the thin blanket aside and swinging her legs to the floor. The cold would stung her bare feet, but she didn't care. Something felt wrong. So wrong. She turned her head to the side. Eli's bed, empty. Eli? She whispered into the dark, hoping, praying he had simply gone to the bathroom or crawled under the bed. No answer. She called again, louder this time, her voice cracking. Still nothing. Panic clamped down on her chest like an iron hand. She stood, her hands shaking, and stumbled to the window. It was open. The curtain fluttered gently in the cold breeze. Moonlight spilled onto the floor like silver water. That's when she saw them, small bare footprints leading out into the night. She bolted out the door without thinking. Her nightgown flapped around her legs as she ran barefoot across the grass. The air was sharp and the trees whispered secrets she didn't want to hear. Eli, she cried again and again, louder each time. Her voice cracked the silence like thunder, but it brought no answer. Only the echo of her own fear. Deeper into the woods she went, branches clawing at her skin, shadows twisting around her. She followed the footprints until they faded into moss. Then nothing. No trail. No sign. Just the endless woods, the endless moonlight, and the growing sound of her own breath as it turned into sobs. Then it came, the scream. It tore through the night like something alive, something broken. A sound full of fear, pain, and the terrible knowledge that something had been taken. Her scream. The scream of a mother whose world had just fallen apart. But she wasn't alone. As the sound faded into the trees, something else moved in the shadows. High above, the moon blinked behind a cloud, and for a heartbeat, darkness swallowed the forest. In that moment something stirred. Not an animal. Not a person. Something else. Watching. Waiting. It had seen her. It had seen her child. And though it made no sound, Mara felt its presence settle on her like frost on her skin. She stood frozen in place, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The woods around her remained still, but the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it grew stronger. Something unnatural had witnessed everything. It had taken her child. And it wasn't finished. As the moon came back into view, brighter than before, Mara finally collapsed to her knees, staring up at the sky with hollow eyes. The trees whispered again. And this time they whispered her name. Whispering Pines was the kind of village that didn't appear on most maps. Tucked between dense, towering woods and steep, forgotten hills, it sat in a quiet corner of the world where time moved differently. The forest surrounded everything, breathing against the village's edges like a living wall, ancient and watchful. Thick pines stretched high into the sky, their dark green needles rustling softly even when there was no wind, hence the name Whispering Pines. Only a few dozen people lived there. Everyone knew everyone else, and not always in a good way. They shared history, bloodlines, secrets, and stories, especially the old stories. Stories about the forest, the shadows, and the moon. In Whispering Pines, folklore wasn't just tradition, it was survival. The elders often said, "There are rules in this place, old rules. Break them, and the woods will remind you." It was a village where the past never quite let go. No streetlights lit the narrow paths between homes. Most houses were made of old timber, their roofs heavy with moss, windows often shuttered at night, especially during full moons. People whispered about strange things, children talking to shadows, lights flickering in the woods, animals vanishing under silver skies. And though few dared to say it out loud, everyone feared the moon, especially the full one. The moon brought change. The kind of change no one wanted. Mara had never believed in such things. She grew up here, yes, but she'd always been different. Her parents were outsiders who'd moved in when she was a child, hoping to escape the chaos of the cities. Her father, a writer, loved the quiet. Her mother never quite adjusted. By the time Mara was 16, both her parents were gone, her father to illness, her mother to grief. She had stayed, stubborn and strong, but with a piece of her always looking beyond the hills. People respected her, but they never quite accepted her. Maybe it was because she didn't go to the village gatherings. Maybe it was because she asked too many questions, or didn't cover her mirrors on moonlit nights like the others. She didn't follow the rules. She didn't want to live in fear. But everything changed when she met Tom. Tom had been one of the few who saw her for who she really was: bright, curious, a little wild. He worked as a carpenter and had hands that smelled of pine and sawdust. He listened when she spoke, made her laugh when she wanted to cry. With him, the village seemed less suffocating. They built a home near the edge of the woods, raised chickens, planted herbs, and talked about moving away someday. Then one spring sickness came. Quick and cruel. By summer Tom was gone. Mara broke in ways no one could see. She still smiled, still spoke politely, still kept her garden alive. But something inside her had withered. The only thing that gave her purpose now was Eli, her son, her light, her reason to get out of bed every morning. Eli had Tom's eyes and Mara's curiosity. He was 5, full of questions and wonder. He loved looking at the moon, asking about the stars, drawing strange creatures with crayons. He'd chatter about dreams where he floated through the trees or danced on rooftops. Lately, though, he had grown quiet. He'd started waking up in the night, staring out the window at nothing, whispering things under his breath. She thought it was the grief still living in his little heart. She thought maybe it was just dreams. Or maybe he was just like her, feeling the edges of something strange that lived in the bones of the village. The people of Whispering Pines watched Mara with the kind of distance reserved for someone marked by loss. They were polite but wary. Some said she should have remarried by now. Others said she spent too much time walking the woods. But none of them said what they really thought, that her family wasn't meant to be here. That they had upset the balance. That maybe, just maybe, the moon had noticed. There were rules here after all. You didn't sleep under moonlight. You didn't whistle in the woods. And you never, ever, left your windows open when the full moon rose. But Mara didn't believe in superstitions. She believed in science, in reason, in reality. At least she used to. Now, with Eli gone, the village's whispers followed her like shadows. People looked at her with pity but also fear. As if they knew something she didn't. As if they had seen this before. As if they were just waiting for the moon to come again. Mara had tried to forget the first time Eli mentioned the Silver Woman. It was months before he vanished, on a quiet evening as she tucked him into bed. He'd looked at her with those wide, thoughtful eyes and whispered, "She was at my window again last night." Mara had paused mid-tuck, confused. "Who, sweetheart?" "The Silver Woman," he said like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. "She glows, Mama. She sings sometimes. She told me the moon misses its children." Mara had smiled tightly, brushing it off as a dream. "Just your imagination," she'd said gently. "Kids made up things. Especially ones as creative as Eli. He saw faces in clouds and talked to insects. It didn't worry her, at least not at first. But he kept bringing her up. She doesn't knock. She just watches," he said one morning over oatmeal. "She has eyes like light," he murmured sleepily after a nap. "She says she remembers you." That one chilled Mara in a way she couldn't explain. She hadn't told Eli much about her past. What could a child possibly mean by that? Still, she tried not to let her fears show. She wanted to protect him, not feed his imagination with worry. Then the sleepwalking began. She found him one night standing barefoot in the hallway, eyes wide open but distant, staring at the front door. She gently guided him back to bed. He didn't remember it the next morning. A week later, she caught him trying to open his bedroom window in the middle of the night. When she asked what he was doing, he said, "She told me the sky is open tonight." That's when she started locking the windows. Every night without fail. Even then she wasn't thinking about legends or spirits. She was thinking about safety, about a boy still grieving, dreaming strange dreams. Maybe the full moon was triggering something in him, or maybe it was something he picked up from the other children. But the whispers in the village said otherwise. The older folk spoke low and careful around children, but Mara had heard enough. Stories of long-ago children who wandered off on moonlit nights, never to return. Of glowing figures who stood beneath windows humming lullabies no one remembered teaching. Of the moon choosing certain children, sensitive ones, lonely ones, and calling them away. Most people said those were just stories. But not all. There was one woman, old Miss Della, who once grabbed Mara's wrist and said, "The moon watches your boy. You need to cover the glass. It sees him." Mara had pulled away, unsettled. Then came the night of the blood moon. The sky turned a deep, unnatural red. The moon hung low and heavy, like it was closer than usual. Mara had felt strange all day, an uneasiness that curled in her stomach and wouldn't let go. Eli had been quiet, eyes flicking off into the window. At bedtime he didn't ask for a story. He simply said, "She says tonight is the last time." "The last time for what?" Mara asked, heart pounding. Eli shrugged. "She's waiting." Mara checked his window twice. Locked. Curtains closed. She kissed his forehead, tucked the blanket tight, and left the door open a crack. But the night pulled her into a deep, dreamless sleep. For the first time in weeks she didn't wake at every sound. Not until the cold hit her face and the silence filled her ears. She sat up quickly. Something was wrong. The house was too quiet. She rushed to Eli's room. The window was wide open. The lock, still unbroken but turned. The curtain floated in the breeze. And on the wooden floor beneath the sill, small, perfect footprints led across the room and out into the dark. Panic exploded in her chest. She called his name again and again, louder each time. No response. The footprints continued outside, across the dewy grass into the thick woods. The blood moon glowed overhead, casting everything in a strange, rusty light. The trees seemed taller. The shadows seemed to stretch. She ran, barefoot and breathless, into the forest, following the prints as far as she could. But the path ended near a circle of stones, worn smooth by time. The prints simply stopped. There was no sound. No wind. No child. Just the red moon above, watching silently. By morning the whole village knew. Word spread fast in whispering pines, faster than the sun could rise. Before the sky had even turned fully blue, a dozen neighbors stood outside Mara's cottage, boots laced, flashlights in hand. Some brought dogs. Others brought food. A few brought nothing but worried faces and old fears. Mara didn't remember much about that morning, just flashes. Dirt on her hands. Voices calling Eli's name. Her own heart pounding louder than any sound around her. The woods were cold, and the deeper they went, the darker it seemed, as if the trees were leaning in, hiding something. They searched every path, every hollow log, every rocky ledge. People called out again and again. "Eli! Eli, come on, little one." But the woods swallowed the sound, gave nothing back. The footprints from the night before had already faded in the morning dew, leaving them with no trail, no direction, no answers. By midday hope was already thinning. "There's no sign of struggle," one man said quietly. "No scent for the dogs." "It's like he just disappeared," said another. Mara refused to stop. Her legs burned, her voice cracked, but she kept moving. She shouted until her throat gave out, until all she could do was whisper his name between sobs. The others started to slow. Some turned back. But not her. And then came the whispers, not from the trees but from the people. She heard them when they thought she wasn't listening. Words carried on the edge of voices, barely above a breath. "Moon taken." Just like before. She should have covered the glass. Mara grabbed one of the older women by the arm. "What did you say?" Her voice was hoarse, barely human. The woman looked startled, then afraid. "Nothing, child. Just old stories." Meant nothing. But Mara didn't believe that. She saw it in their eyes. They weren't just afraid for Eli. They were afraid of what his disappearance meant. As if this had happened before. As if something old had returned. She pressed anyone who would talk. Some turned away. Others gave her half-truths, fragments of stories passed down like broken glass, sharp and unclear. Children in the village had gone missing before, years ago, always under a full moon. Always in the same way. No signs. No noise. Just gone. And the ones who returned weren't the same. They called it being moon taken. A curse, a punishment, a calling, no one really knew. The elders said it was a warning from long ago, from when the moon made promises to the people of the forest. Promises they had broken. Mara didn't care about legends. She just wanted her son. But after 3 days the official search ended. The volunteers stopped coming. The sheriff, who'd only half believed in the beginning, gave her the look, that sad, practiced look that said it was time to let go. Mara refused. She scoured the woods alone. She mapped out every stone, every creek, every twisted tree. She marked places Eli had once drawn in his notebooks, strange shapes she once thought were just doodles. Now they looked like something more. Something real. She stopped eating much. She barely slept. Her hands grew raw from digging through leaves and soil. Her eyes were always red, from crying or from the cold, no one could say. The village watched her from a distance, some offering pity, others fear. She began to speak to the moon at night. "You have him," she whispered. "Give him back." Every night, she stood at the window Eli had vanished from. She never closed it now. She left it wide open, daring the moon to show itself, daring the silver woman to return. Weeks passed, but the silence never changed. No footsteps, no dreams, no child. Only the endless, quiet ache of loss, and the moon, round and full, shining above the trees like an eye that never blinked. It was nearly a month after Eli vanished when Mara finally spoke to Della again. The old woman had been avoiding her, slipping behind doorways or ducking into the chapel whenever Mara came near. But Mara had learned to wait. She sat outside Della's little cottage at the edge of the village, wrapped in a shawl and holding a flask of tea. She waited from sunset until the stars began to blink into view. And finally the door creaked open. "You're not going to leave, are you?" Della muttered, her voice dry as dust. "No," Mara said softly. "You know something. I need you to tell me." Della hesitated, then waved her inside. The cottage was dim and smelled of herbs and old smoke. Dried bundles of plants hung from the ceiling, and the only light came from a flickering oil lamp on the table. Della sat down with a long sigh, her hands shaking slightly as she poured herself a cup of tea. "I thought those stories were over," she said. "Thought the moon had gone quiet." Mara leaned forward. "What stories?" Della looked up, eyes heavy with something deeper than age. "Long before your family came here, long before most of us were born, there was a pact. Between the village and the moon." Mara blinked. "A pact?" Della nodded slowly. "Back then people feared the sky. They knew it was watching. The moon especially. It doesn't just shine, it sees. Remembers? The elders believed the moon was a keeper of balance. When something went too far, too much greed, too much pride, too much loss, the moon took something to restore the order." Mara's hands clenched in her lap. "Took what?" "Children," Della said, her voice barely more than a breath. "Always the young ones. Always during the full moon. Sometimes they'd come back, but they weren't the same. Quiet. Changed. Touched by something beyond our world." "Why children?" Mara asked, her voice trembling. "Because they still live between worlds. Still soft, still open. The moon doesn't take the hardened or the bitter. It takes those it can carry without breaking." Mara's eyes burned. "You're saying Eli was taken because of some pact? Some old agreement?" "Maybe. Maybe the pact was broken. Maybe we forgot our side of the bargain. We used to honor the moon, turn our mirrors, shut our windows, leave offerings of light on the solstice. But those traditions faded. People laughed at them, called them superstition." She looked at Mara, then truly looked at her. "And some stopped believing altogether." Mara stiffened. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice cracking. "No one does," Della replied gently. "But the moon doesn't care about belief. It only cares about balance." Silence settled between them. The lamp hissed softly, shadows dancing along the walls. "Eli mentioned a silver woman," Mara said at last. "He said she visited his window. That she was waiting." Della's expression didn't change. "They always see something. A figure. A light. Sometimes a woman, sometimes just a voice. But it's always something soft. Something that calls to them." "So what do I do?" Mara asked. "How do I get him back?" Della shook her head slowly. "The moon doesn't give back what it takes easily. You can beg. You can curse it. Or you can try to understand what it wants." "And what does it want?" Della's voice dropped to a whisper. "It wants what was promised. What was lost. It wants the truth." Mara left that night with more questions than answers. But one thing had changed. Her grief, once like a heavy fog, now had shape. Now it had a name. The moon was not just a light in the sky. It was a memory, old, patient, watching. It had taken her son not by accident, but with intention. She looked up at it as she walked back home, its pale face full and heavy above the trees. It watched her just as it had watched Eli. And she whispered into the cold, "I see you now." The moon did not answer. But it didn't need to. It happened just before dawn, exactly 1 week after Eli disappeared. The mist was thick that morning, curling low over the grass like it had crawled down from the trees. The village was silent, still heavy with sleep. But Mara was awake. She hadn't truly slept since the night Eli vanished. Every morning she stood at the edge of the forest, watching, hoping, begging the silence to break. And then it did. At first she thought it was a trick of the mist, a small shape in the clearing near the stones where the footprints had ended. Her heart skipped. She ran, barefoot and breathless, across the wet grass, not daring to speak his name in case the moment vanished like smoke. It was him. Eli lay curled on the moss, eyes closed, face peaceful, as if he'd only been napping. His clothes were dry. His skin was warm. There was no dirt, no scratches, no signs he had spent even an hour outdoors, let alone 7 days. "Eli," she whispered, kneeling beside him, tears already falling. "Oh God, Eli." His eyes fluttered open slowly. They were still the same shape, still the same color, but something inside them had shifted. There was a depth there now, a strange, distant knowing that didn't belong in a 5-year-old boy. He looked up at her and smiled faintly. "You came late," he said. Mara blinked. "What?" "She said you'd find me," he murmured. "But the stars had to blink first. That's the rule." Mara pulled him into her arms, clinging to him, trying not to shake. But even as she held him, something felt different. His skin was warmer than it should have been. His heartbeat steady, but slow. Too slow. When she finally pulled back to look at him, she saw it. His fingers were clutching something. A small piece of paper, folded tightly, edges damp with morning dew. Mara opened it slowly, afraid of what she might read. The handwriting was strange, loopy and childlike, yet old, like someone copying the shape of letters from long ago. Read. "She still waits for her son, don't make her wait again." Mara's blood turned cold. She stared at the note, then at Eli. He was humming now, quietly, eyes unfocused. His hands moved across the moss, drawing in the dew, shapes, spirals, circles within circles. Symbols she didn't recognize. But they looked like moons. "Where were you?" she asked him, her voice trembling. Eli didn't look at her. "In the place with no doors," he said softly. "She kept me warm. She cried sometimes, but not loud. Only in the light." Mara held him tighter. "Who, Eli? Who cried?" He blinked slowly. "The Silver Lady. She said the moon is lonely. She says you know what that feels like." Mara's breath caught. This wasn't just her son talking. Something had come back with him. Over the next few hours she tried to get more from him, but he only spoke in fragments. He said the trees told stories when no one listened. That he danced with shadows that didn't have names. That time was different, on the other side. He ate little. Slept often. When he did, he sometimes whispered in languages Mara didn't know. He drew constantly, on paper, on walls, in the dirt. All of it, moons, eyes and doors with no handles. Mara didn't tell anyone right away. She knew what they'd say. But in her heart she knew the truth. Eli had come back. But not all of him had returned. And someone, something, was still waiting. The days that followed were quiet but not peaceful. Eli slept more than he ever had, waking only to eat small bites of food and scribble his strange symbols before drifting back into slumber. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. He just existed like a ghost trying to remember how to be a boy. Mara kept watch, her days blurring into nights. She gathered every drawing he made, carefully smoothing out the pages and placing them across the floor. She started seeing patterns, moons in different phases, repeated shapes that looked like open eyes, and clusters of circles that reminded her of star charts. And always, in the center, the woman. He drew her over and over. Long hair like flowing mist, arms always open, face turned toward the moon. Sometimes her eyes were closed, sometimes they were wide, staring directly at whoever looked at the drawing. One sketch sent a chill down Mara's spine. Eli had drawn himself standing next to her, holding her hand. Around them were floating stones and trees bent sideways, as if pulled by a wind that didn't belong to earth. Eli began to speak in riddles, mostly while half asleep. "The air there is cold but not heavy," he whispered one evening. "It smells like stars. It hums when you close your eyes." Another time he said, "She said time is slower there but she remembers faster." Mara started writing everything down. At night, while he slept, she traced the drawings with her fingers and whispered the notes aloud, as if trying to summon answers. Della had told her the moon wanted what was owed. Mara didn't know what that meant, not yet. But she felt something coming. The drawings weren't just images. They were memories, or at least fragments of them. And then one night Eli spoke clearly. "I remember." Mara turned to him. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at the window. His voice was calm but distant, like he was reading someone else's thoughts. "She didn't take me. I followed her." Mara knelt beside him. "Eli, where did you go?" He didn't blink. "I stepped through the shadow under the tree. It opened when the moon turned red. It was soft, like stepping into a cloud. Then I was somewhere else." "Where?" she asked. He tilted his head. "It was a place made of moonlight and glass. The ground was like silver water but it didn't move. There were stars below my feet and above my head." He paused, frowning. "She was waiting there. She knew my name before I said it. Who was she? Mara asked gently. He looked at her then, eyes wide. The moon's wife. The words made Mara shiver. She said she lost her boy, Eli continued. She said he was taken before she learned how to love him right. She said the moon let her keep the sad ones just for a while. To help her remember. Tears filled Mara's eyes. Did she hurt you? He shook his head. No. She was kind. But she cried a lot. Sometimes she'd forget I was there and just stare at the sky. She held my hand when I got cold. He hesitated, then whispered, She thought you wouldn't come. Mara swallowed hard. But I did. Eli smiled just a little. I told her you would. She said, she hoped you'd understand. That night, Mara stayed by his side, unable to sleep. She looked at the drawings again, now with new eyes. They weren't just strange, they were maps. Warnings. A memory of a place that shouldn't exist but somehow did. She began to believe it wasn't just magic. It was grief. That place, the silver-lit world Eli spoke of, was built from sorrow. A realm between sleep and wakefulness, where time bent and sadness lingered like fog. Maybe that's where the lost things go. The forgotten. The broken. The moon wife wasn't a monster. She was a mother. A mother who had lost her child. And Mara, for the first time, felt something other than fear. She felt connection. There was a reason Eli had come back. A reason he remembered. A reason for the message in his hand. She still waits for her son, don't make her wait again. This wasn't just about Mara's child. It was about a bond deeper than time, shared between two grieving mothers, one of earth and one of sky. One searching through dirt and forest, the other wandering through a world of moonlight and memory. And now they were tied together. By loss, by love, and by something still unfinished. Mara went to the old shaman because she had nowhere else to turn. His name was Callum, a quiet, strange man who lived deep within the woods in a home made of stones and bark. He wasn't part of the village anymore. Not really. People said he had seen too much, that his mind wandered too far, but they still came to him when the world stopped making sense. When grief refused to let go. When things that shouldn't be possible began to happen. Mara found him sitting by a small fire, stirring a pot of something that smelled like pine and smoke. He didn't look surprised to see her. He simply nodded toward the log across from him. You brought back one touched by moonlight, he said, voice like gravel. She nodded. He came back, but not all of him. I know, Callum said, poking the fire. I felt the shift when it happened. The moon's pull changed. She was crying again. Mara frowned. You know what took him? Callum looked at her, eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. Not what? Who? He took a slow breath, like drawing in memory itself, then began. She was once a mother like you, he said. Long ago, before this village was more than scattered homes and frightened people. Her name has been lost, they just call her the moon wife now. She bore a son, loved him fiercely, but the world took him from her too soon. Illness, some say. Others say the forest. Either way, he was gone. And she broke. He stirred the pot slowly, watching the steam rise. Her grief was so deep it stretched beyond the skin. It changed her. She stopped living, but she didn't die. Instead, she made a plea to the moon itself, a cry so desperate, it pierced the veil between worlds. And the moon answered. It gave her a place between time and light where she could wait. But it came with a price. Mara's voice was barely a whisper. The children. Callum nodded. Once a generation, under certain moons, she is allowed to borrow a child. Just one. Always one. She takes them to her realm, not to harm them but to soothe her sorrow. She doesn't understand what she's doing. She thinks she's giving them comfort. But her grief twists everything. She's trying to replace her son, Mara said softly. Callum nodded again. Yes. She holds them close, gives them dreams, feeds them memories that aren't theirs. And when they return, they're never quite whole. Mara stared into the fire. Can it be stopped? To end the cycle, Callum said, you must give her what no one ever has, truth and closure. She doesn't know how to let go. She still believes her son might return to her. That's why she takes others. She needs someone to tell her the truth. To face the pain she's been hiding from for centuries. Mara's voice trembled. How do I do that? Callum reached into a worn pouch and pulled out a smooth black stone etched with a thin silver line, a crescent moon carved by hand. This is a mirror stone, he explained. When placed beneath moonlight, it reflects not just your face but your soul. You must bring this to the place where your son vanished. At the next full moon you speak her name, the one she's forgotten, and offer her the stone. Tell her the truth. Show her the love that still exists even through loss. Mara took the stone. It was warm in her palm, heavier than it looked. But what if she won't listen? She asked. She will, Callum said. Because you're a mother. Like her. And mothers know how to speak without words. Mara left that night with a heart heavy with hope and fear. She spent the following days preparing. Not for battle, but for a conversation that would reach beyond life and death. She sat with Eli and told him stories of Tom, of the life they once had, of the world before the moon reached for them. He listened quietly, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying. His drawings became softer. Less strange. He was coming back, slowly, but something was still calling to him. On the night of the full moon, Mara stood at the edge of the clearing where Eli had vanished. The forest was still. The moon hovered above, bright and pale, bathing everything in silver. She placed the stone on the ground, directly in the moonlight, and whispered the name she had found in one of Eli's oldest drawings, a single word written in childish scrawl, Celine. The air shifted. A wind moved through the trees, though no leaves rustled. And then, from the silence, a figure began to form, tall, glowing softly, made of mist and moonlight. The moonwife. Her eyes were wide, full of sorrow and longing. Mara stepped forward, heart pounding, and said the only thing that could begin to break the curse. He's gone. But he was loved. And the silver woman began to weep. The lunar eclipse came 3 nights later. It was the kind of night the villagers avoided. Doors stayed locked. Curtains stayed drawn. Even the animals fell silent, sensing the weight in the air. But Mara had been waiting for this moment. She felt it in her bones, something old was ready to open. She returned to the clearing where Eli had vanished, mirror stone in hand. This time she was not afraid. She wore a shawl woven by her mother, and around her neck hung a pendant Tom had given her long ago. 2 parts of her past, reminders of love, of pain, of everything she had lost and still carried. The moon above glowed pale and round, waiting. As the eclipse began, a shadow crept slowly over its surface, turning it from silver to rust. The clearing darkened, but the air shimmered faintly, like moonlight still fought to shine through. Mara stepped into the center and placed the mirror stone on the ground. She knelt beside it and whispered again, Celine? A breeze stirred, though no trees moved. Then the ground beneath her pulsed once, not violently but with a slow, deep rhythm like the heartbeat of the world itself. Light burst from the stone, climbing into the sky like a beam. Mara gasped, shielding her eyes. And then she was falling. Not in the way that pulled her body, but in a strange, silent way that made her feel weightless and hollow. The forest, the clearing, even the moon above melted away, and darkness wrapped around her like a cocoon. Cold and soft. When she opened her eyes, she was somewhere else. The sky was silver, though there was no sun. The ground was made of smooth, glowing stone that shifted gently beneath her feet, like standing on water that had turned to light. The air was cold but didn't sting. It smelled like rain and something older, like old books and forgotten memories. She had entered the moon realm. Mara walked slowly, her footsteps making no sound. All around her floated fragments, bits of broken toys, children's shoes, stuffed animals made of starlight. Whispers floated through the air, not loud enough to understand but full of longing. Laughter echoed faintly, sad and soft, as if remembered by someone far away. Then the illusions began. She turned a corner and saw Tom. He stood there just as he had looked on the day they met, warm eyes, crooked smile. You shouldn't have come here, he said gently. Mara's throat closed. You're not real. He stepped closer, face kind and cruel all at once. You left Eli alone. Just like you let me go. You're always letting go, Mara. Her heart ached, but she forced herself to take a breath. You're not him, she whispered. And I didn't leave either of you. Life did. He faded like smoke. The next illusion was herself, standing across from her with hollow eyes and a tear-streaked face. You weren't enough, it said. I know, Mara said, her voice shaking. But I tried. And the illusion dissolved, leaving only silence. Finally, after what felt like hours but might have been moments, she saw her. The moonwife. She stood at the center of a great circle of stones that floated gently above the ground. Around her were children, not solid but not quite ghosts. They shimmered faintly, faces calm, hands held gently in hers. They looked peaceful like dreams. But Mara knew they didn't belong here. The moonwife turned. Her eyes were wide, glowing faintly. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, all sorrow and light. I didn't mean to keep him, she said softly. He was warm. He reminded me of my boy. Just for a little while, I wanted to remember. I know, Mara replied, stepping closer. Celine looked down at the children. They're safe here. Time doesn't hurt them. Pain doesn't grow. But they don't live, Mara said gently. They don't belong in silence. They belong with the ones who love them. Celine's face twisted, part sadness, part fear. But what about me? You don't need to forget, Mara said. But you need to let go. Grief doesn't end when we move on. It just learns to breathe beside us. The moonwife's hands trembled. The children around her began to fade, slowly drifting upward like wisps of light. Will it hurt? Celine whispered. Yes, Mara said. But it's not the end. It's the beginning of healing. Tears streamed down Celine's cheeks, soft, glowing, falling like drops of moonlight. The stones around her lowered gently to the ground. The silver sky began to shift, the cold lifting just slightly. Mara stepped forward and took her hand. Together they watched the children rise into the light, not gone, but released. The moon realm sighed. And everything began to change. The realm was quiet now. The whispers had faded. The drifting children had vanished into the light, one by one, leaving only a soft silver glow where they once stood. The air felt warmer, lighter, as if a great breath had been exhaled after years of being held in. Still, the moonwife remained, her form dimmer now, less defined, not quite fading but softening. She stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the space where the children had disappeared. Mara watched her for a long moment, unsure of what to say. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full. Full of unspoken feelings, of years lost to sorrow, of memories too painful to speak aloud. Then quietly Mara broke the stillness. I know what it's like, she said. Her voice was raw but steady. To love someone so much it hurts to breathe when they're gone. To lie awake every night and beg for just one more moment. To want to scream at the sky because it's too quiet. The moonwife didn't move, but something in her posture shifted. A slight turn of the head, a subtle lean forward. She was listening. Mara stepped closer, her hand still holding the pendant Tom had given her. She clutched it tight. I lost the love of my life. I shut the world out because I thought if I kept moving I might forget how bad it hurt. But I didn't forget. I just stopped living. Her eyes stung. Her voice shook. And when Eli came, I promised myself I'd be strong for him. But I wasn't. I was broken and I didn't know how to fix it. I let the silence grow between us, thinking he wouldn't notice. But he did. Children always do. She took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. For him. For you. For letting my grief become a wall instead of a bridge. The moonwife turned fully now. Her eyes shimmered, not with light, but with understanding. I didn't mean to take them, she said softly. I was just alone. I thought if I held them long enough, the hole in my heart would close. But it never did. It only grew. Mara stepped closer, reaching out. I don't blame you, she said. You were a mother. You were hurting. But now, you've given them peace. You've given me back my son. Celine's eyes filled with tears again, not the glowing kind but real human tears that trembled at the edges before falling. I was waiting for someone to speak the truth, she whispered. Not with fear. Not with anger. But with love. The sky above them began to change. The silver light dimmed, replaced by a soft gold that warmed the air. The realm around them flickered, trembling like a dream about to end. Mara could feel herself being pulled back. Her time there was almost over. She held on to the moment, not wanting to forget. As the light wrapped around her, the moonwife leaned in close and whispered one final message, a voice so quiet it felt like it brushed against Mara's very soul. Tell the mothers, the moon is not cruel, only lonely. And then Mara was gone. The light faded. The realm disappeared. And the clearing was still again, bathed in the soft glow of a full, healing moon. Mara woke in the clearing, the damp earth cool beneath her and the stars blinking gently above. The moon hung high again, round, full and pale, but no longer heavy with grief. It was calm now, watching like an old friend instead of a restless ghost. Beside her Eli stirred. He was curled up like he had been the night he vanished, small, peaceful, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. But now there was color in his cheeks, warmth in his skin. When his eyes fluttered open, they were bright and clear. He looked at her, really looked, and smiled. You came, he whispered. She gathered him into her arms, tears slipping silently down her face. I never stopped. They walked back to the village in the early light, hand in hand, with the forest whispering quietly around them. No shadows followed. No strange whispers trailed behind. Just the sound of leaves, birds, and the faint rustle of wind that felt almost like a lullaby. The village stirred as they arrived. At first only a few came out to see, wide-eyed, stunned. Then more followed. Mothers wept. Children pointed. No one spoke right away. There were no questions. Just awe and the quiet hum of something ancient finally letting go. Over the days that followed, Eli began to return to himself. The strange symbols stopped appearing in his drawings. He laughed more. He ran, played, and even cried like a child again, not like someone holding the weight of another world inside him. Every night, Mara tucked him in with stories. Every morning he woke without fear. And something else changed in the village. The mothers, those who had long grieved in silence, began to dream. They saw glimpses of their lost children, not in fear or sorrow but in light. Smiling. Laughing. Some dreamed of old lullabies. Others woke with tears on their cheeks and peace in their hearts. The forest grew a little quieter. The nights felt a little less cold. The curse was broken. Still the moon remained. It watched from above, round and silent, but changed. No longer a pale thief in the sky. No longer a hungry eye full of longing. It seemed softer now, still distant but not alone. Mara would look up sometimes and smile, knowing that somewhere in the vastness of night, Celine watched too. Not to take but to remember. Not to mourn but to hope. And the village, once steeped in silence, began to sing again. Lullabies to stars, songs to lost ones, and soft, grateful prayers to a moon that had once been cruel, but now simply watched, and waited, with love. Years passed as years always do. Seasons turned, the forest grew thicker and greener, and the village of whispering pines settled into a quiet rhythm once more. The old stories softened into whispers, then into bedtime tales. But the truth never fully vanished. It lingered in the hush of wind through trees, in the silver wash of moonlight over rooftops, and in the eyes of those who had once lost something, and found it again. Eli grew tall and bright-eyed, his memories of the moon realm fading like the end of a dream. Yet sometimes when the night was still and the moon hung heavy in the sky, something stirred in him. Not fear, not sadness, but a quiet ache, like remembering a song he couldn't quite name. On one such night, now older, Eli stood alone on the hill outside the village, hands in his pockets, face tilted toward the glowing sky. The moon was full again, round and watchful, casting its soft light across the trees and fields. The air was quiet. Then behind him, faint and clear as breath on glass, a voice whispered, "Tell her I remember." Eli didn't startle. He didn't turn. He just closed his eyes and smiled gently. Back at their home, Mara sat in the doorway, her hands resting in her lap, a blanket draped around her shoulders. She didn't need to ask where he was. She knew. She looked up at the sky, eyes finding the moon with ease as she always did. When Eli returned, silent and thoughtful, she met his gaze. "I heard her," he said softly. Mara nodded, her smile touched by time, touched by understanding. "I know," she replied. "So did I." And overhead, the moon shimmered, not lonely, not lost. Just remembering.